Chapter 1106, Being Looked Down Upon. Tang Xiu calmly and quietly watched the reunion between his father and his old brothers with a warm feeling. The occasion that revealed each man's true nature made him realize that he was still far worse than his own father, which was also the reason his father put down his guard when facing his brothers. However, he still held his principle that no matter how good the brothers were, it was still less important than being formidable himself. When he was plotted against back when in the immortal world, he always thought those good friends of his were his true brothers, and yet, he ultimately found that it was all his wishful thinking. Suddenly, his face slightly shifted and he quietly retreated outside the warehouse. As he appeared at the square outside, he glanced around a few times and asked lightly, "Why did you come here?" "Grand Master." Tang An's figure didn't appear, but her faint voice passed into Tang Xiu's ear. "We just received the news that a group of foreigner experts is gathering at the Haiti private port in Yungang City. They are now occupying the site completely and nobody can get close to it. The info gathered by our intel department says there are nearly 100 people gathered there, and the number is still increasing." Tang Xiu frowned and asked, "Who's the owner of that port?" "Wen Feng. He's a real estate developer in Yungang City and is also the richest man there," said Tang An. "Our men have secretly investigated him and found some issues pertaining to him." "And those issues are," continued Tang Xiu. "Wen Feng spent his childhood as an orphan who lived in the orphanage before he was 12 years old, said Tang An. "But there was a big fire in the orphanage later on and many staff and children were burned to death and many went missing. Wen Feng was one of the missing people, but he suddenly appeared in Yungang City when he turned 18 about 6 years after the incident. He entered the key school in Yungang City to study and took the CET, college entrance test, in his second year. He was admitted to the Northern Uni, but then gave up the opportunity to enroll and started his business in Yungang. After 21 years, he founded the Riverhill Group and became the richest man in Yungang with assets up to 10 billion yuan. This Riverhill Group is not only engaged in real estate development but also foreign trade business with a private port that can accommodate more than 10 large cargo ships." "What I want to know is the issue on his identity," asked Tang Xiu faintly. "It's all about his funds." "Many of his funds came from abroad," said Tang An, "although the capital flows into China from his trade is very secretive. Our men can track the capital flows from some countries abroad even though the respective officials in the country may not be able to get anything should they intentionally investigate him." Tang Xiu's eyes lit up with surprise. What had Wen Feng experienced after missing for 6 years? If he got recruited and became a tentacle of some foreign power and then came back to China, he must have some targets, purposes, and schemes to be carried out. "Have you found out his true identity and those who have rushed over there?" "We haven't gotten anything yet," replied Tang An. "Their movement is erratic and they are drifting from place to place. Further, they're very vigilant. Our intel operatives were nearly noticed by them even though they've been very careful. Additionally, some of our trusted clients have been found out just to track the capital flows from abroad to Wen Feng. If it wasn't for our men stepping forward, it's likely that the other party would have already found us." Tang Xiu squinted with countless thoughts churning in his mind. After the long silence, he slowly said, "We'll head to Yungang tonight. Only the two of us. We'll find out who these people are and which organization Wen Feng is affiliated to." "Understood." There was no other sound or movement after Tang An finished speaking. Tang Xiu fell into his train of thought for a while before turning and walking toward the warehouse. As he came inside, he saw all those big men were training, whereas Li Zibiao was chatting with his father and Ni Pengang. "Hey, Xiu. Where did you just go?" Upon seeing Tang Xiu walking inside, Tang Yunda immediately waved and asked aloud. "I just received a particular message, so I left for a while. Anyway, I'm glad you can meet with your old brothers, Dad." Tang Xiu smiled. "Yeah, I'm really happy to see these former brothers of mine." Tang Yunda happily smiled. "Well, let me introduce you, Xiu. He's Li Zibiao, a once military genius who appeared in the army. How do you do, Uncle Li? Tang Xiu looked at Li Zibiao and smilingly nodded. The big man carefully examined Tang Xiu and shook his head. The bones and body are too weak, and your scholarly aura is way too thick. You'll need a strong force to become a real warrior. But your father is like the god of war to us in the past, so I think a tiger father won't beget a dog son. You must be quite amazing in other respects, right? Tang Xiu's eyes were filled with a strange expression, whereas Tang Yunda and Enai Pengang rolled their eyes, feeling amused by Li Zibiao, who judged someone else from his appearance. The man himself ignored everyone's expression and went on, but then again, what he said about the sandbag just now really interests me. Anyhow, can I have as much as I want if you really have good quality sandbags that can withstand my strength? Tang Xiu shot Tang Yunda an inquiring look. Tang Yunda squinted and exchanged looks with Enai Pengang. He waved to Tang Xiu and smilingly said, well, since we're ready to hand them over to you, just play with them however you like. But don't go too far, though. You also know how expensive medical care is nowadays. Tang Xiu just smiled in response and looked at Li Zibiao's expression, smilingly said, Uncle Li, you think my body and bones are too weak, don't you? Do you feel I'm not suitable to spar with strong men with muscles just because I have a thick scholarly aura? Li Zibiao frowned and hesitantly said, Tang Xiu, I always said whatever I have in mind and your old man knows this too. Throwing dirt on you was never my intention. But, I really do feel that you're too weak, so you must exercise hard in the future. You can come to us later if you like, and we can teach you some self-defense moves. Tang Xiu walked toward the iron frame on the side. After taking off his jacket and putting it on the iron frame, he spoke aloud, everyone, pay attention. Your Captain Li thinks that I'm too weak and wants to teach me some self-defense moves. However, I'm not convinced by him even though I'm very young. That's why I'm going to challenge Captain Li. If he can win against me, he can treat me like a rookie soldier who will come here to report to him every day to practice my self-defense moves. His loud voice spread throughout the warehouse in an instant. All the strong men training inside stopped one by one and gathered with bizarre expressions on their faces. A challenge? He's challenging the unmovable Captain Li. The rest of the security company's elites, 79 of them, looked at Tang Xiu as though he was a fool. They knew their Captain Li Zibiao's strength, who was definitely the strongest of them. There was once a martial art grandmaster expert who came here, and they watched as he was helplessly beaten by their captain. Isn't he the son of our idol? How come he doesn't inherit his father's wisdom and wants to challenge our cap? Isn't this looking for abuse? Alas, I always thought a tiger father won't ever beget a dog son. It never occurred to me this young man was this reckless, though. He didn't ask anything about our cap's strength and straightly took off his coat to challenge him. We all know the cap's strength and that he won't show any mercy even if he's Brother Tang's son. That young man is unlucky. He's in for some hard time. Yeah, being a man means one must have self-awareness, else he'll meet his death very quickly. Yet, he's challenging the cap, huh? Might as well find a T-Rex and challenge it directly. Ah, that's the youngsters nowadays for you. They are full of themselves and their impulse always fills their heads. Does he think the Kappa will look at his father's face and give him some slack in the sparring? That's simply stupid. Hey, forget it, guys. Don't watch this show. It has no thrill nor suspense. With his sharp hearing, Tang Xiu could hear all their whispers and discussions. He slightly curled up his lips and the smile on his face turned a bit thicker. As Li Zibiao shot a calm look at Tang Xiu, he was full of disappointment inwardly. He had a vague hunch that his former captain, Tang Yunda, and Enai Pengang wanted to hand over these brothers to this young man. He would obey it without a question if this young man had the abilities and skills. That was on the premise that he was smart even though his personal combat force was appalling. After all, it was the ability to command that was needed. so that they could charge forward and break through the enemy lines. However, he was so arrogant and unexpectedly challenged him. That was simply stupid. Li Zibiao felt that Tang Xiu not only did not have much power, but even his brain was also not good. If he and his brothers were to be given to this boy, that would spell misfortune to them. Are you sure? The man looked at the smiling Tang Xiu. His tone carried out the bad taste he felt inside. Being keenly aware of this man's attitude didn't make Tang Xiu flinch. He just ignored it and smilingly said, "Uncle Li, you also know a man's words hold the weight of his dignity." "I already said it, and I mean it. I heard you talking when I just came in, and I also saw you making the sandbag explode with your kick, so your strength is quite fearsome. However, I don't think it's necessary to look at others with such a narrow vision either. You'll know after our sparring whether I have the strength or not. You know, I'd definitely not hesitate to agree had it been someone else, even if the other party is some martial art grandmaster expert." Li Zibiao shook his head and said, "But you're the cap's son. That makes me feel like a monk who sees Buddha's face. That's why I can't just move and end up hurting you, since Cap is the man I respect the most in my heart." The smile on Tang Xiu's face disappeared. He slightly frowned and said, "You're the captain of this security team. You should know that you must never look down on your opponents, regardless of who they are, or your entire security team will suffer heavy losses." Li Zibiao didn't pay attention to Tang Xiu's statement at all. It wasn't that he didn't understand this truth, but he felt Tang Xiu was like a martial artist, so he held not the slightest interest in complying and doing it. He then pointed to a young man nearby and said, "Hey, Yang Hu. You play with him. But don't use any heavy blows, got it?" Chapter 1107, This Must Be a Dream. The stalwart Yang Hu immediately looked a bit ugly. He let out a long face and cried out after hearing it. "Ugh. How can you give me this thankless task, Cap? If by any chance I go overboard and broke the spirit of young Master Tang, wouldn't it be a grave offense? Spare me the chit-chat and just do it lightly." "All right," said Li Zibiao unhappily. "It will be fine given your skill to control your strength." Yang Hu rolled his eyes and murmured, "But fists and feet have no eyes, you know that. If I were to hurt young Master Tang, you and Idol will blame me." Sitting on a chair, Tang Yunda was at a loss whether he had to cry or laugh. Then, he said aloud, "Hey, Yang Hu, don't worry and act like you always do. I won't flinch even if you make this kid vegetative as long as you got the ability. But of course, you'll lose face if you lose. Wah, rest assured, Idol." Yang Hu grinningly said, "Maybe I dare not boast when facing others, but facing the young master. Cough, cough, well, I mean, I'm still a bit stronger." Tang Xiu frowned deeper and watched Yang Hu shake his arm. He immediately hooked his finger and said, "Let's see speaking rubbish so as to save you from making a fool of yourself. Just come. I'll give you 3 moves handicap." His statement stunned Yang Hu, and the smile on his face disappeared. He immediately sneered as he saw Tang Xiu's indifference. "Young Master Tang, your father is my idol, but it doesn't mean I'll treat you the same. 3 strikes, huh? Then unleash everything you got. But I hope you're not some weak shrimp and get done in by a few cuffs and kicks." Tang Xiu shook his head in response. His body flickered and appeared in front of Yang Hu in an instant, barring the fella of any room to react as he delivered a punch to his cheek. Though he only used a tiny fraction of his strength, Yang Hu's big body was still sent flying backward. Bam, bam, bam. His figure followed closely like a shadow as a series of whipping kicks hit Yang Hu's body. The latter could only scream pitifully and turn like a bottle that tumbled and rolled on the floor for 6 meters away before finally stopping at the feet of several stalwart men. Cough, cough. The series of blows almost made Yang Hu choke. Finally, he coughed violently for a while and then looked up with a disbelieving expression. The room turned quiet. No, accurately speaking, it was deathly still. Apart from Tang Yunda, everyone in the entire warehouse was staring dumbly at Tang Xiu. Some rubbed their eyes to make sure they were not seeing things. Tang Xiu shook his head and spoke, you should have figured out the strength of your opponent before you acted like some pretentious pricks. Know yourself and know thy enemies to be ever victorious. And honestly speaking, you're like an ant to me. You're still not my opponent even if I use less than 1% of my strength. Li Zibiao sobered up from his shock. A scowl suddenly appeared on his face upon hearing Tang Xiu's remark. He just thought that Tang Xiu was nothing but a youngster with no strength to truss up a chicken. He didn't expect he'd transform majestically in a flash and defeat the soldier whom he had trained and became an expert. How did you do it? Li Zibiao inquired with a gloomy face. At this moment, intense curiosity was seen on the faces of the nearly 80 stalwart men in the surroundings as they quickly broke into discussions.
Yeah.
How did he do it? I just felt my eyes were seeing things. It was like an illusion. Yang Hu may not be the strongest here, but he still can last dozens of moves against most of us. He can deal with tens of hoodlums and still be fine. So, how can he got beaten that easily? His speed was so fast that I missed his moving route. I'd similarly get beaten if I were in his shoes. Holy cow. I truly lost my sight. I never thought he was a hidden expert. But, that young Hu brat is also at fault for taking him lightly. He wouldn't have ended up that bad if he were to face him with caution. I never thought of such an outcome either. I thought the play wouldn't be fun to watch. That kid is not bad, he can barely enter my eyes. All the comments were straightly ignored by Tang Xiu. He looked at Li Zibiao who was staring at him and lightly smiled. Well, Uncle Li, don't tell me you've forgotten what I just said. It's a taboo to look down upon anyone and we must never treat anyone lightly in the future even though the opponents you're facing are children, since those kids may not be those you can deal with either. The man in question took a deep breath. He turned to look a certain burly man nearby and shouted, Alu, go ahead and exchange some blows with him. Remember, you won't get dinner tonight if you lose. The burly man who got shouted at suddenly looked bitter. He scratched his head and said, Cap, can you change the punishment? I'm confident I can defeat.
Young
Master Tang, but well, everything has some contingency, If by any chance I were to lose like that young Hu brat, I don't want to starve. Li Zibiao angrily growled. Cut the crap. Just get your ass over there and do it. And fucking gimme your 100%, alright. The burly guy. Lu shrugged and looked at Tang Xiu. He let out an honest and pure smile. Seems holding back isn't allowed for the sake of my dinner, young Master Tang. You gotta be smart here, and I'm afraid I'll have no supper tomorrow if I display an awful show. No worries. You can definitely have your meal for tomorrow's dinner, but I'm sorry for today, though. Tang Xiu hooked his finger and lightly smiled. A cold light flashed in Lu's eyes, and he instantly charged toward Tang Xiu aggressively like a tiger coming out of the cage. His speed was very fast as he delivered a whooshing flying kick towards Tang Xiu in the blink of an eye. Bam! Tang Xiu raised his arm with a seemingly slow movement. Yet, in fact, it was very fast to the extreme and easily blocked the swift and fierce kick. In an instant, his figure was closing into Lu and his arm gently moved to the guy's waist. Hiss. The sound of Lu's gasping for cold breath was heard, while the guy himself looked horrified. As he landed back to the floor, he staggered backward a few steps and rubbed his aching waist. He stared at Tang Xiu and said, You can block my whipping kick in the air, huh? That's awesome. You're strong and your strength is really beyond my expectations, young Master Tang. But I hope you're also prepared for the following moves. He slammed the tip of his feet on the floor in the next instant. The moment his hand left his waist, Lu was as though turning into a cannonball and dashed towards Tang Xiu faster than his first charge. A loud whooshing sound was heard when he delivered his punches. His charging trajectory was also very particular, like a curved arc, as his strike quickly went towards Tang Xiu's nose. Pa! Tang Xiu moved lightning fast and instantly grabbed Lu's wrist, causing the man's complexion to change. The fella felt like his waist was being clamped by an iron pincer, and the enormous impact rendered his arm unable to move forward. Just as he tried to punch Tang Xiu with another fist while using his leg to obstruct Tang Xiu's response, a pain suddenly struck his abdomen. Bam! Lu's body flew straight to the back, his bottom in front and feet and head behind. He flew for 4+ meters away before falling with a sitting posture on the floor. You're too weak. Tang Xiu shook his head and said, I'm really disappointed if all of you here only got similar strength. Even the children I've trained are stronger than you all. Shut up. Although these tens of big guys were shocked by Tang Xiu's strength, they were much stronger than Yang Hu and Lu. Tang Xiu's statement caused some of them to storm forward. Nearby, Ni Pengang, who was witnessing the scene just now, hurriedly got up to stop them. Tang Yunda, however, immediately grabbed his arm, shook his head and smiled. Have I ever talked big to you before, Pengang? Let me tell you something, this is just child's play to show. He hasn't been serious all this while, else none here can face him, even if all of them are ganging up on him. Ni Pengang's complexion looked ugly as he replied, What nonsense are you talking about, brother Tang? Don't you know the strength of our brothers? Tang Xiu may be able to beat Yang Hu and Lu, but the two of them are not ranked in the middle among our 80 brothers. But those who are charging at him now are all experts. Tang Yunda just smiled in response. Our so-called experts are all like jokes in Xiu's eyes, Pengang. Just let them play well since they want to play. I'm not even worried as his father, so what are you worried about? Hesitating for a moment, Ni Pengang then sat again with a scowl on his face, saying, You're the one who said it, so I won't say much. But I really want to see if your cherished son can easily beat these brothers of ours like you just said. Let's just wait and see, shall we? Tang Yunda meaningfully replied, I promise you that Xiu will surprise you. He has given me a pleasant surprise already, all right. Ni Pengang groaned. But thanks, and don't scare me. Beside them, Ni Jia's eyes were flashing bright as she heard the conversation between her father and Tang Yunda. She suddenly interjected. Dad, I also think Tang Xiu is really strong though. Have you noticed it yet? Yang Hu and Lu didn't succeed in giving any injury to him whatsoever and got easily beaten instead. Do you think Uncle Li can also do the same? Ni Pengang stared blankly for a moment, then his expression changed to disbelief. He got up yet again, his daughter's reminder made him realize the issue. Let alone Li Zibiao, he was an expert himself, yet such a feat was not something he could do. I also think you've yet to realize another issue, Dad, Ni Jia went on. Tang Xiu can easily defeat Yang Huan. Lu, so what does that mean? It shows he didn't go all out. Besides, his plain expression tells me he is much stronger than what he has displayed. This time, Ni Pengang was completely shocked. Chapter 1108, Thoroughly Convinced. Expressionlessly standing still, Tang Xiu just watched as the three strong men oozing fierce auras aggressively charge at him. Just as they were a few meters away from him, he slowly raised his hand to stop them and spoke. The three of you should be better than the duo from before, but it's still not enough for me. Why don't we raise up the level? Li Zibiao paced back 2 steps and looked at Tang Xiu with fear in his eyes. At the same time, a deep sense of shame also filled his heart as he felt that he had made a spectacle of his own incompetent subordinates. He was waiting. He needed to wait for the later sparring's results. If Tang Xiu was defeated, he wouldn't be too embarrassed, though he would lose some face. But if Tang Xiu won again, he would really lose face toward everyone in the entire warehouse. One of the tree stalwart men snorted and asked, "How do you want to play? You three may be regarded as experts in the eyes of others, but you're still far from enough in my eyes," said Tang Xiu with a light smile. "You want to have a bout with me, so the 70+ of you might as well gang up on me so you can last longer. Arrogant. You're too cocky. Just put it off after we play." The three men looked angry and then charged at Tang Xiu at the same time. Tang Xiu only shook his head and smiled in response. This time, he didn't retreat or even try to evade. He moved forward to clash with their howling punches and kicks head-on. After connecting his punches, in but a flash, their bodies were sent flying upside down. Tang Xiu grinningly said, "I told you that you three are not enough, didn't I? Suppressing and abusing you is too easy for me. Now you saw it for yourselves. You didn't listen to my advice, isn't that a shame? Lost, this is disgraceful." The trio who fell to the floor at this time truly wished they could dig up a burrow to hide. They now had figured out how terrifying Tang Xiu was. Even though the three of them teamed up, they still got beaten up by him, not even lasting for a second. The remaining 70+ people were now staring dumbly at Tang Xiu as if they were looking at a monster. Powerful and valiant. They felt many adjectives had been cast into the shade, and there was no way to express how fierce Tang Xiu was. They were all well aware of the strength of those three brothers, yet they didn't even last for a second, which was unbelievable. Li Zibiao was similarly dumbfounded. He never imagined the sparring match would develop this way. Tang Xiu was simply not a human. He was like a humanoid beast. Sitting nearby, Anai Pengang had just sobered up from his shock. He directly covered his forehead after seeing such a situation. He then looked at the smiling Tang Yunda and said, "I'm now convinced, Brother Tang. Those who can make me feel so are not many in this life, but your son is definitely one. He's really amazing. It turns out genuine cultivators are so powerful." "I already told you that, didn't I?" responded Tang Yunda smilingly. "Well, I admit I didn't believe it in the slightest. I've heard Tang Xiu's skill in Chinese medicine, but never heard of this side of him before," said Anai Pengang with a dry smile. "I know the combat force possessed by cultivators, but it's too far for my can grasp, so—" Tang Yunda waved to interrupt him and smilingly said, "No need to continue. I brought Xiu today means that he's capable of taking over the things here and manage our brothers. You should understand already how I do things, Pengang." With a solemn expression, Anai Pengang nodded. "I didn't think it through, Brother Tang. I'm sorry about that." "Nah. Leave out the formality. We're all brothers." Tang Yunda smiled. Anai Pengang finally let out a sincere smile and nodded. "Well, I can finally be at ease to hand these brothers of ours to Tang Xiu, then." Tang Xiu looked at the shocked and stunned Li Zibiao. Intending to give him a good lesson, he said aloud, "What are you guys gawking for? Apart from your captain, all of you just come at me. My dad and uncle and I want to give you guys to me and make me your leader, so you had best to unleash every ability you got and show me what you're capable of. I want to see whether you're qualified to be my men." "Say what? We are being given to him? This?" Each and every one of the 70+ experts of this security firm was shocked, but they immediately shut their mouths upon looking at Yang Hu and the rest who hadn't yet crawled up from the floor. Li Zibiao drew in a deep breath. His eyes flickered with lights and he said in a deep voice, "Didn't you guys hear Tang Xiu's order? What the hell are you gawking for? Move your asses and join hands together. Don't make me lose face. Move. Attack. Strike." The 70+ stalwart men finally unleashed their fierce sides and stormed over at Tang Xiu. They didn't hold back and squeezed out every strength they could unleash as though fighting with their lives on the line, and quickly appeared in front of Tang Xiu. Bam, bam, bam. Still wearing a calm expression, Tang Xiu constantly walked in the midst of these men, while easily avoiding their attacks. But each time he moved, a strong man was sent flying. He used his strength in a particular and ingenious method. None of them was seriously injured since he could send them flying. Li Zibiao retreated 4 or 5 steps, his eyes bulging as though they were going to pop out of their sockets. The scene he was witnessing was like a dream. It was too scary. Too fierce and unbelievable to the extreme. He was perfectly aware of the strength of these 70-plus brothers. Any one of them was an expert, a powerhouse in the eyes of numerous others. They could literally move everywhere on the battlefield and reap the lives of their enemies. At this moment, however, they were like docile lambs being ravaged by a ferocious hungry wolf. By now, Ni Pengang was completely struck dumb. Many of these brothers were people he had trained personally, so he was well aware of their strength. Yet now, was he dreaming? Next to him, Nijia's eyes were getting brighter and eventually turned into worship as the scene unfolded. She was a proud woman and, even though she was very polite on the surface, was a proud peacock to the bones. But now, her arrogance was completely defeated by Tang Xiu's strength. He was too fierce, amazing, and outright terrific. This man not only got the looks and ability but also went against the natural order in terms of combat power. If she could find such a boyfriend, no, if she could find a husband like him, she would definitely feel safe in the future. 40 seconds. It was all it took for Tang Xiu to beat them. Some of whom crawled on the floor while enduring the pain, losing their spirit to charge forward again. They were simply scared. They used to face the hail of bullets. They were not afraid to face powerful enemies, yet such fear overwhelmed them at this moment. They felt they were not facing a human being. This young man was simply a demon king, a great devil with fearsome strength. Fighting him? You're simply looking to get abused and beaten up. Tang Xiu clapped and nodded happily. Well, you guys are not bad. At least you can persevere for some time, though it was just about 40 seconds. Anyhow, can we now have our sparring, Uncle Li? You blurted out that my arms and legs are too thin and I don't have the strength to even truss up a chicken, no? Li Zibia's face turned red, and his shame almost covered his face and run. His lips squirmed as he stared at Tang Xiu's vague smiling face. Then, he coughed a few times and waved. Let's forget that, shall we? I admit my mistake. I broke the taboo and looked down on you out of my arrogance. I apologize for my previous attitude, Tang Xiu. I've already learned my lesson. I'll definitely keep it in mind. The man's attitude was much to Tang Xiu's satisfaction. The reason why he sparred with the rest of these guys was that he wanted to make Li Zibiao, as the captain, understand that no matter what kind of enemy they faced, they must never take them lightly. Being responsible of the brothers, failure was just a minor issue, but it was a huge deal if they were killed due to this negligence. If that's the case, then that's all. And you guys, your injuries are nothing. I got impeccable control over my strength, so you'll recover in about 10 minutes. You won't even feel pain by then. Everyone who heard this couldn't help but twitch their mouths. He has good control over his strength. This kid is really going to be against the natural order. How can he still pay attention to employ such discretion in such chaotic brawl? Where is his bottom line, exactly? How strong is he, exactly? Tang Xiu returned to Tang Yunda and Ni Penggang's side. Then, he lightly smiled and said, How was my performance, Uncle and I? Do you feel relieved giving them to me now? If I were to feel restless giving them to you, I'm afraid there'd be nothing in this world that can make me feel at ease anymore, replied Ni Penggang with a forced smile. But then, you're amazing, and you deserve my admiration, Tang Xiu. Your old man has given birth to a good son. Pride instantly swelled up in Tang Yunda's heart after hearing this. He then got up and smiled. Xiao, you mustn't be complacent and become arrogant even though your uncle and I praised you. These are our brothers. They are the most reliable and trustworthy people we have, so you had better treat them well in the future and help them become stronger. You can rest assured about that, Dad, Uncle and I. Tang Xiao nodded. Having said that, he turned to look at the stalwart men who had crawled up from the floor, saying, "Let me introduce myself again. I'm Tang Xiao, Tang Yunda's son. In your eyes, I'm just a 20-something young man. Further, I look frail and seemingly have not much strength. But I can tell you now that even hundreds of people with similar strength like you are still not my opponents." Everyone looked at Tang Xiao in silence. Although they felt the statement was exaggerated and extremely arrogant, they chose to be silent since it was them who were very arrogant previously, and it hurled back and struck them with more pain and shame. The current you are very weak. But that's because you were not under my guidance. Tang Xiao went on, that's why I won't take you guys with me for the time being, so you're staying here. However, I'll teach you a set of cultivation techniques and develop a training program for you. If you don't achieve the strength I've specified in 3 months, you'll be eliminated since you're not qualified to be my men. Chapter 1109, just 30%. As the captain in everyone's eyes, Li Zibiao paced 2 steps forward and asked in a deep voice, "Can I ask what a cultivation technique is, and the level of strength you set as the threshold?" "You're not yet qualified to know," said Tang Xiao lightly. "You only need to know that each and every one of you must be 10 times stronger than the current you 3 months later, else you're not eligible to be my men." "Are you kidding me?" cried out Li Zibiao angrily. "We may not be as strong as you, but we're already experts in the eyes of numerous people. It will take us a long time of training to even make a little progress given our current strength. Wanting us to be 10 times stronger is outright impossible. Nothing is impossible to achieve in this world." Tang Xiao sneered. "It only depends on whether you can afford the hard work. Tang 28, come over here." Tang 28, who had been following Tang Xiao but had never spoken, suddenly came to Tang Xiao's side and respectfully said, "Sovereign. Tell them how old you are." Tang Xiao nodded to him. 8.5, answered Tang 28. Looking back at the men, Tang Xiao spoke in a deep tone, "Did you guys hear it? He's 8.5 years old now. How high do you think his level of strength is at his present age?" Li Zibiao squinted and observed Tang 28 and then blurted, "Even if he's a martial art prodigy, I don't think his actual strength is recognizable given his age. We are not your match, but he..." "You're actually laughing and looking down on him?" Tang Xiao sneered. Tang 28, Captain Li has yet to display his ability. You should understand what to do." Tang 28 slightly nodded and paced forward several steps toward Li Zibiao, saying, "Please enlighten me, Captain Li." Li Zibiao was stunned, and the 79 security firm's strongmen were similarly dumbfounded. Even the sitting Ni Pengang and Ni Jia were struck dumb and tongue-tied at this moment, looking at Tang Xiao and Tang 28 in disbelief. A spar? Was this some kind of joke? An 8.5-year-old child wanted to challenge Li Zibiao? Did Tang Xiao lost his mind? After Li Zibiao could react, he angrily glared at Tang Xiao. "Are you insulting me, Tang Xiao?" "You can take it as such if you want." Tang Xiao sneered. "If anything, he has already challenged you. Are you afraid of this 8.5-year-old child, by chance? You gotta teach him, Cap." Yang Hu yelled. "Go get him, Cap. They just want to show off their superiority, so let them know you're not weak."
Ah!
Lu also shouted. "Yeah. Fight him. Spar him and teach him a lesson." Li Zibiao was burning with anger, yet he smiled and gave Tang Xiao a thumbs up. "Great. I didn't expect you to humiliate people just because you're strong. You want me to spar with a child, then I'll give it to you. Just you wait. You'll see how you end up. Have you forgotten what I just said, Captain Lee? Tang Shou sneered. Don't talk too much about anything or you'll be beaten, humiliated, and lose face yet again. It's going to hurt this time. The man drew in a deep breath to control his emotions and then said to Tang 28, I won't hold back and be lenient since you're the one who challenged me, kid. It was your so-called sovereign who said that we mustn't take anyone lightly. Coming at me with your 100% power is an honor to me. Tang 28 expressionlessly said, I'll make sure not to injure you since you're too weak and the sovereign himself doesn't want you to get injured. All right, let's start. Humph. If it wasn't for the previous incident, Li Zibiao wouldn't have bothered to bicker with a kid, but he recalled Tang Shou's actions previously. He immediately cast away any careless thoughts and charged forward to kick Tang 28 without holding back. Pa! Tang 28 raised his little hand and straightly blocked Li Zibiao's kick. The latter felt like his foot had been hit by a hammer even though it was protected by his boot. You're too weak to bring me any threat whatsoever. No wonder Sect Master felt bored and asked all of you to gang up on him. Tang 28 looked at Li Zibiao, whose face discolored. His small figure leaped up quickly and straightly delivered a kick to the man's cheek. That one kick only used 30% of his strength, yet Li Zibiao was still sent flying for 10 meters before slamming heavily on the wall. What? Impossible. I must be seeing things. Cap is. What the hell is going on? How can that kid be so fast? And his power, even Cap himself was sent flying backward. But it's impossible to fly that far. Did this kid begin practicing since he was still in his mother's womb or something? Even if he did, there's no way he can be this powerful, right? I must be dreaming. Absolutely. What a fucking mess. Each and every one of the 79 security firm's strongmen exclaimed. They were unable to believe what just happened as if it was the most unbelievable thing in the world. You guys feel shocked, huh? Tang Shou said lightly, you think that it's impossible for Tang 28 to have such a powerful strength since he's only an 8.5-year kid, don't you? Although they didn't answer, their expressions betrayed their inner thoughts. It was indeed something they couldn't believe. Then make them believe it, Tang 28. Tang Shou ordered. As you will it. The boy's figure instantly turned into a blurry image. Successive sounds of crackling were heard and were particularly harsh. The 79 strongmen who had just crawled up from the floor for a short time kissed the floor again. The difference was that Tang 28's blows were heavier than Tang Shou's as his control was not that good. The stalwart men who had been hit by Tang Shou now didn't have the strength to even crawl up from the floor. They could only curl up on the spot they got hit and wail pitifully. Tang 28 then stood in the midst of these men and coldly said, Sovereign has been educating you ever since he entered this place to make you learn the truth not to judge anyone by their appearance. And yet, you're all too dull and too proud. This is the punishment you deserve. A punishment? That's right. This is a punishment. Shame instantly filled everyone's heart, including Li Zibiao. They regretted their arrogance after Tang Shou defeated them before, but getting defeated by Tang 28 this time felt like they were getting slapped on the face by invisible hands, causing a burning sense of shame and wishing they could drill a hole to hide, unwilling to face people anymore. They had lost face. What a shame for making a fool of themselves. Anai Pingang's breath was rough and heavy. He stared at Tang 28 fixedly. Only now did he finally realize how terrifying a cultivator could be. Tang Shou told him that he could become a qi refining stage cultivator himself within 3 months. This fact now made him feel ecstatic. Tang Shou, can I be more powerful than Tang 28 3 months later if I practice diligently? Anai Pengang couldn't wait to ask. Tang Xiu turned around and saw the anticipation on Ni Penggang's face. He smilingly shook his head and said slowly, "Uncle Ni, Tang 28 is not weak. He's a genius who stood out from the tens of thousands of children soldiers. Let alone cultivating for 3 months, you may not be able to reach his level even if you practice for 3 years. The cultivation path is a road one must slowly walk forward while gradually accumulating his cultivation." Ni Penggang's pupils shrunk and felt disappointed. Just from his observation, Tang 28's combat power really was too strong and no worse than Tang Xiu's, though he wasn't clear about the specific real strengths of these two people. As he thought up to this point, he asked, "Anyhow, how much power did Tang 28 just use, Tang Xiu?" "Tell him, Tang 28. Tang Xiu smiled. "Perhaps 30%, give or take," answered Tang 28. Hiss. Ni Penggang couldn't help but gasp some cold air. The way he looked at Tang 28 was like he was watching an alien. How old is this kid? An 8.5-year-old boy only used 1/3 of his strength, yet he just literally crushed all his brothers who had been hardened in many battles. That was simply heaven-defying. The 80 members of security firm who had been finally eased from the pain couldn't help but shiver due to deep fear upon hearing Ni Penggang's conversation with Tang Xiu and Tang 28. They couldn't imagine the outcome of the battle should they run into such a fearsome enemy on the battlefield. They would absolutely die miserably. Tang Xiu glanced at Tang Yunda and smiled. "You can have some talks with Uncle Ni if you like, Dad. The spars and testing are done already. Time is precious and I'm preparing to train them well after you've finished the discussion. I'll work hard to make their strength to skyrocket rapidly. Let me say a few words first." Ni Penggang nodded and slowly said, "Brothers, most of you were not selected by Tang Yunda then. It was I who picked you, guys. But all of you are our brothers and genuinely our own people. I've made a decision with Tang Yunda to hand you over to Tang Xiu, so he can train you well and temper you more into elite cracks. Hence, you are to obey his commands from today onward and treat him as your highest commanding officer." The 80 men didn't speak, but a bit of anticipation could be seen on their faces. They clearly realized that if they opted to obey Tang Xiu's commands, they would be able to get cultivation techniques from Tang Xiu and thus became formidable experts in the future. They wanted to be stronger and obtained power for one goal, revenge. Chapter 11:10, Difficult to Unravel. "I believe you're all well aware of my purpose in founding this company," said Tang Yunda after pacing 2 steps forward. "The deep feud and the blood that was shed by our brothers 2 decades ago must be avenged. Some of the brothers who died in the battle were your relatives, and some others were our comrades in arms. You chose to join us, so you should all be ready and have the mentality to kill the enemies and avenge your brothers. It's been 20 years, however, so I don't know if you guys still remember the hatred of our brothers and whether you're willing to avenge them. That's why I'm giving you a chance to choose today. If you're willing to do anything when we go against the world to avenge our brothers, then I welcome you to stay. But you can also choose to leave now should you have changed your mind. I'll give you 2 million yuan so you can have a good life later." Up to this point, Tang Yunda's expression turned extraordinarily serious. Revenge. "I've been waiting for so many years, just to wait for the days of revenge. SOE company, house Dolan, you're gonna pay for what you've done. Blood for blood, teeth for teeth, and an eye for an eye. Kill." The 80 people expressed their hatred with similarly intense determination and each of their own firm presence. Tang Yunda stood straight while watching these brothers who had climbed up from the ground. He slowly raised his right hand and made a standard military salute. DRAP. They may no longer serve in the military, but they still saluted to express their respect for the brothers who had fallen in the battle, while at the same time displaying their willingness to stay and fight side by side with the brothers who were still alive. Tang Yunda nodded in silence. Then, he spoke again, "Now I ask you, are you willing to follow my son, Tang Xiu?" "We are." A deafening and orderly reply came. Tang Yunda nodded without a word and said, I, Tang Yunda, guarantee that my son will treat you like his own brothers. What my father just said is correct. Tang Xiu confirmed in a deep voice. He handed you over to me, so I'm going to lead you to charge through the enemy lines, killing everyone in House Dolan and completely obliterating the SOE company and the other companies under their control. Li Zibiao paced forward a few steps and asked aloud, I have 2 questions first. Please ask, replied Tang Xiu. First, what do we call you later? Asked the man. You can call me boss, answered Tang Xiu. Roger, boss, shouted the 80 people in unison. Li Zibiao went on, so, when are we going to start, boss? We, brothers, have been waiting for so many years, and some have long been unable to wait much longer. You don't have to worry about waiting anymore since you've waited for so many years already. Tang Xiu shook his head and continued, now is not yet the time to attack House Dolan, but I'll lead you to charge forward later only after you've become stronger. I give you guys 3 months. If you can increase your strength tenfold in 3 months, only then are you qualified to be my men. Those who fail to do so will be given 2 million yuan as retirement pension and will be dismissed. Tang Yunda and Ni Pengang exchanged glances and tacitly agreed to depart along with Ni Jia. Tang Xiu, however, didn't rush to leave since he had decided to incorporate these people. He didn't want to waste time and directly taught them cultivation techniques. Although he only imparted them some introductory contents, it was able to make their cultivation reach the golden core stage. They were ecstatic. Shortly after, he developed a training program. Then, he pulled out some pills from his interspatial ring and gave 2 to each person. With these 2 pills, these soldiers who already had qi in their systems yet had no idea how to control the energy would quickly turn their true qi into true essence. It was their foundation Tang Xiu valued the most. Such a foundation would make it easier for them to step into the ranks of cultivators and thus, could make it easier for them to cultivate. All these 80 men wore horrified looks after seeing the training plan formulated by Tang Xiu, but then agreed while gritting their teeth after Tang Xiu explained, and emphasized that only by following his training would they be able to rapidly promote their strength by tenfold in just 3 months. As dusk came, Tang Xiu left. He left Tang 28 to accompany his father to have a drink with these old brothers of his at their reunion. Then, he quietly led Tang into Liangang City. The distance between Shanghai and Liangang was about 400 plus kilometers. It only took the 2 people a little more than 2 hours to arrive in Liangang by a high-speed train. Sect Master. As someone in charge of intelligence affairs, Jin had already arrived in Liangang in advance after his injuries healed. He had long been waiting outside the train station. How is the situation there? Asked Tang Xiu while walking. A lot of strangers have been seen entering this port city, said Jin. Their whereabouts are the same as those who already came previously. They are all drifters and vagabonds, and there are quite some outlandish people. But our men have already discovered their final meeting point. Where is it? Asked Tang Xiu with raised brows. It's at the Golden Coast, a private club, answered Jin. Is this club under Wenfeng, by chance? Asked Tang Xiu. No, Jin shook his head. We got our operatives to investigate it. This club is not his, nor is it under the Riverhill Group. The Golden Coast is owned by someone called Xu Heng. We've also investigated this man. The establishment is his only business, and he has no relationship with Wenfeng whatsoever. Additionally, rumors have it that Wenfeng and Xu Heng had a grudge and even got into a fight in public. Later, however, some people acted as intermediaries between them, so the matter was settled by leaving it unsettled. That was camouflage to blind the public eyes. A contemptuous look flashed in Tang Xiu's eyes. Those who had a relationship with Wenfeng came to the private club run by Xu Heng, meaning that the man had a deep relationship with Wenfeng. It was likely they belonged to the same force, so the brutal clash was likely done to cover the truth from the public. So, how many are there gathered in the Golden Coast Club now? Tang Xiu went on. We have no way to count the numbers specifically, replied Jing. Their whereabouts are too secretive, and our intel operatives haven't yet investigated many of them. Additionally, the Golden Coast security may seem lacking and looks normal from the outside, but the interior is extremely strictly guarded. You can see a guard stationed in every 3 steps, and a sentry post between 5 steps. There are at least nearly 300 security guards there, leaving no chance for anyone to sneak in. Tang Xiu's expression turned serious. This level of security displayed a huge power behind it. Thus, this meeting was very important. Just as Jing took a seat in the car, his mobile phone buzzed. After fishing it out from his pocket and putting the call through, an intel operative's voice reported. Someone just entered the Golden Coast. His identity is Guotao, an influential and very wealthy businessman from Shaanxi. Understood. Jing hung up and looked at Tang Xiu. Sect Master, just now. Tang Xiu raised his hand to interrupt him and lightly nodded. I heard it. I've heard about this Guotao guy. He's a real estate boss with a net worth of 10 billion yuan. He's also a martial artist and has a security company under his flag. Sect Master, there are a lot of big bosses in the country with tens of billions net worth, yet do you actually know him? Don't tell me, you.
Nah.
No wild guesses, all right, replied Tang Xiu lightly. I heard about him from a friend. He mentioned him to me. Prior to this, Tang Xiu heard the man from Li Laoshan in their conversation way back then. Guotao was a wealthy businessman in Shaanxi province, who was also a die-hard fan of martial arts and once had a spar with Li Laoshan and beat the latter badly. The most important thing was that Guotao was a very ruthless man with a beastly nature. He never cared about his opponent's identity every time he sparred, and he had never and would never stop before he saw blood. After giving it a thought, Tang Xiu took out his mobile phone and dialed Li Laoshan's number. Hey, brother Tang? What kind of wind blew for you to call me? Anyhow, I've been waiting for a while for you to invite me to drink, you know. Li Laoshan's hearty laughter then came from the phone. Well, I got tons of things at hand lately, old bro, Li. Many of which are quite complicated, so I've not been able to find time to invite you to a drink. Tang Xiu smiled. Wait for me to deal with them, then I'll find you to have some drinks. That's a deal. Li Laoshan chuckled. Anyway, you must have some issues since you're calling me now, right? Just say it. I'll definitely help you as long as this old brother of yours can do it. Actually, I just want to ask you about someone you once mentioned to me. I want to hear how much you know about him, said Tang Xiu smilingly. Who is it? Asked Li Laoshan in a strange tone. Well, I still remember you mentioned someone when we were chatting. It was about a wealthy businessman called Guotao of Shaanxi. How much do you know about him, old bro? Asked Tang Xiu. Li Laoshan was silent for more than 10 seconds before he slowly said, You'll probably get the answer on the face if you ask others about him, brother Tang. Nobody will give you the details, but I know some very secret things about him. Tang Xiu's expression shifted and he inquired more. Could you please tell me, brother Li? You know, Guotao is a successful rich businessman on the surface, but he's also a strong martial artist. Even if he hasn't yet reached the martial art grandmaster level, he isn't far off either. Additionally, he also has a security company consisting of martial artists and experts he personally groomed. The secret I'm gonna tell you, however, is not these. Guotao still has another identity. He has been abroad for many years and only returned to China a decade ago to set up his company. But he belongs to a very mysterious organization abroad, and I don't know much about the details of this organization. I only know that this organization is great at investigation and gathering intel, and they also engaged in selling intelligence too. Information and intelligence? Is this the Dark Wind organization? Coldness flashed in Tang Shou's eyes as he asked again, how do you know about this secret, brotherly?